Well, good afternoon. Governor Kehoe just proposed one of the largest and most devastating tax increases in state history while trying to deceive Missourians into thinking it's a tax cut. Since the state income taxes provide about 2/3 of the state's general revenue fund, eliminating that revenue source requires a massive increase in both the rate and scope of the state's sales tax to avoid bankrupting state government. The result would be a net tax increase for the vast majority of Missourians. If you enjoy paying substantially higher taxes on just about everything you buy, then you'll love Tax Hike Mike's plan. If you want the state to tax services that are currently constitutionally protected from taxation, you'll love Tax Hike Mike's plan. If you think being able to afford the basics of life should be beyond the reach of even more Missourians, then you'll love Tax Hike Mike's plan. And if you believe in robbing from the poor to give to the rich, you'll love Tax Hike Mike's plan. And perhaps the worst part of Tax Hike Mike's scheme is that there's no guarantee that it will even balance books. So while most Missourians would get smacked with a massive tax increase to pay for yet another unwarranted tax cut for the rich, it could still leave the state collecting less revenue than before, which inevitably will mean devastating budget cuts. That means less money to invest in our children through public education, less money to support law enforcement to keep our communities safe, less money to repair crumbling roads and bridges, less money to ensure that the basic medical needs of all Missourians are met. In other words, Tax Hike Mike wants to dig his hands deeper into most people's pockets, but provide them fewer services in return. He's already provided a preview of the hard times to come by proposing $600 million in core cuts in his proposed fiscal year 2027 state budget and underfunding K-12 public schools by at least $190 million. And if Tax Hike Mike gets his way, the financial crisis will get progressively worse. House Democrats believe Tax Hike Mike's scheme is a blueprint for disaster, and we will do everything possible to rally Missourians into defeating it and protecting their own pocketbooks. I'm happy to take your questions.
Representative, was there anything in the governor's budget plans or his State of the State address that you felt like could work, or you guys would be willing to work with him on to make better for the voters?
Listen, I am thrilled to hear the governor champion a bill that I first introduced a few years ago, which would allow women in the state to get divorced if they're pregnant. That was a highlight today, and while the credit was given to a Republican who just started carrying the bill last year, I'm really excited to see that bipartisan effort get noted.
Leader,
Go ahead.
Leader Army, I had a question. So when Governor Kehoe's up there, he said people can make more fiscally responsible decisions than politicians. Well, right before the State of the State, I don't know if you saw it in the rotunda, there's a group called People Not Politicians that was out there against this gerrymandered map that the supermajority passed last year. Did you find any irony in his speech today when talking about fiscal policy versus other policy we've seen?
You know, what I found ironic is I think that there was a part of his speech where he talked about if the Missouri voters were to pass this income tax proposal, he looked forward to supporting the will of the voters. That's irony. That's irony in the face of everything that he and his administration have been doing to undo the will of the people, whether it's on workers' rights, abortion rights, the maps, all of it.
Governor Kehoe called for $10 million, so a total of $60 million, increasing for scholarships for private schools within the state. Last year was $50 million. Treasurer Malik is asking for $100 million. So one, what do you think of the discrepancy between what Kehoe is calling for and Malik, and also Democrats' idea that the ESA dollars are going to be a continued cost that might be for Fogel?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to hand it over to Representative Fogel.
Hi, Betsy Fogel, Ranking Minority Member on our State's Budget Committee. Honestly, I was excited that the number was only $10 million in additional general revenue that's going to be spent, or at least being proposed to be spent, on the Missouri Most Scholars program. That is something that House Democrats will continue to push back on, and happy to get into that if you'd like. overall, a quick comment on the foundation formula. I think if we are going to go down this path of privatizing education, with which the governor has made clear his intent to do so, we cannot do it at the expense of our public education systems. And that promise, once again, has been broken by the governor to not fully fund the foundation formula. This year, that number is about $190 million, less than where it should be. I would also say it's very interesting to me that the governor's number this year and what he pitched or planned to spend on the foundation formula is the exact same number that we spent last year. And he was very vocal in his opposition. Senate Republican leadership was very vocal in their opposition to fully funding the foundation formula. And I'm very thankful that the governor has chosen to agree with me and agree with my caucus that we should be spending those dollars in kids in classrooms across the state of Missouri.
What would be the effect to education if the state were to adapt open enrollment?
Ready? I'm going to turn it over. That's not my lane.
I just found out it was my lane. I'm Marty Jacobs. I'm in District 38. Several things about open enrollment. What strikes me first, or has struck me first, is that it is a way for an unintended consequence, maybe from the legislation, is that parents who move from a district where the families are paying less property tax value and they're moving into a district where it's a higher property tax value being charged by people, their children are being educated in a situation where they're sitting next to a student whose parents are paying twice as much from a local property tax for that education. Now, that's an ideological, and that's a practical issue to an ideological question about open enrollment, which is, does it really make education better? And the jury is out on that in most of the states that have gone to open enrollment. And the underlying factor of many states that have open enrollment is that the state provides 70 to 80% of the funding. In the state of Missouri, it's far, far less than that from the state level. So there is going to be this disparity that I talked about. I think the other concern I have is that the students and families that want to move from one district to another may do so for something that's less laudable than just wanting to have a better education for their child. Could be because they want to be on the basketball team that has a shot at a state championship. We have students that will do that right now occasionally, and there's a whole system of laws and policies that MSHSAA has to deal with that. And I've been told that that would be the same case with this. But if you move and you can say that it's for educational reasons and no other, then your children can be a part of that. And there's a consequence back on the other side then for the schools that are struggling to maintain enrollment, is that they lose some people from the courses and classes and from the athletic and academic activities programs that really help build those and help them grow and create a climate and a culture where these kids can really thrive. And that's what I really worry about, is that all of a sudden 5 or 6 students that are in a choir program move over to another district, and now the choir program in District A is far less of a place that people want to be a part of. So I think it creates a very unnatural situation, with the idea being laudable, which is to improve education. But I think the reality of it will be that it won't, and so on balance, I think it's something that we should not support.
Representative, your illustration there, though, sounded a lot like some form of economic segregation. I mean, is that a defensible system, and should a student's educational quality depend on their property values at all?
In terms of depending upon the property value, that's a reality that we have, right?
But it sounds like you were describing.
Student A in a district that has $3 for $100 or $100 evaluation, for example, is moving over district where it's $6 per $100 evaluation, and so.
But why does the kid from the cheaper house have to be stuck in a education system that doesn't have the same quality?
Well, that's an illustration where some people could argue there's an unfairness there, that there's not an equal taxation burden on the people receiving the same value. That's the only reason I'm bringing that up. But I think it has other issues that have to be dealt with as well.
I have a question on.
I'm sorry, on the issue of income taxes, the governor's remarks made it sound like if voters approve a phase out, that the details would then come in the next session. Is that your understanding? And what should voters know before they go to the polls?
Well, there are a few things. One, we were really excited to hear the details of this income tax plan today. Unfortunately, we still don't have many of those details based on the State of the State address. I look forward to seeing the bill proposal come down. However, what I will say is that this income tax proposal is it's interesting if it is going to be the way he has described it in this address today, which is that step one will be asking Missourians to vote to eliminate their income taxes. Step two will be, how are we going to deal with that? And my fear is that what will happen is that Missourians will be sold this opportunity to lower their costs, to keep more money in their pockets by eliminating their income tax, and then they will eventually be held hostage by the fact that they have voted to eliminate their income tax and blow an enormous hole in our budget. And then the General Assembly will ram through something else that forces Missourians to vote on increasing their taxes to make up for it. That's a speculation at this point, though, because I don't know what the details are. It is concerning that seems to be the plan.
I have a question on healthcare. Whoever would like to address that. Right now, as of right now, we're still seeing the tax credit subsidies from the Affordable Care Act, not effective, which means higher premiums going into this year. When it comes to healthcare coverage, do you see the governor's budget addressing the shortfall in any way, or what do you guys want to see the state do to try to make up for that gap?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think if there's one area of the budget that I thought the State of the State was pretty light on, it was all things related to healthcare, health and mental health. I think very few details were made publicly available today, so we'll be diving into those conversations as the budget books become available. I will say one of the things that was highlighted by the governor was the rural health transformation dollars that are flowing, of course, from the federal government here in Missouri to the tune of about $216 million. And though I would imagine our caucus is supportive of those dollars coming, I think it's important to note that in the One Big Beautiful Bill, not only are we receiving that roughly $200 million, but there are also a lot of significant repercussions that are reducing revenue coming to the state and reducing our ability to provide our Medicaid service and Medicaid services and other healthcare related things. I am concerned quickly to that point about the governor said today, or I would expect to not have any increase in state worker pay when I look at the healthcare services that the state is tasked with providing, especially to those with disabilities and our state's most vulnerable. I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to fill those healthcare related positions because we're not choosing to invest in our state workforce.
We also heard abortion come up, which, if I'm not mistaken, the people at one point voted on before, but now it's coming back around again. What did you guys make of that?
Not surprising. We know Amendment 3 is going on the ballot this year. We know that the supermajority Republicans who are in charge of this state have been championing that ever since they trampled all over the will of the voters who told us what they wanted in November of 2024. Nothing is surprising about that. It is as frustrating today as it was last year.
Representative Fogel will looking at a tighter budget this year, and also a year where the former appropriations chair in the Senate was removed and replaced now with Senator Slack. What are your expectations for the budget process here with both a leaner and someone else now in charge of the Senate side?
Of course, the governor has recommended a roughly $600 million cut to core services provided by state government. I would say I think that's a very interesting number when you factor in the capital gains elimination from last year. That original fiscal note was roughly $150 million. All in, I think the budget office, the governor's budget office is communicating that's going to be about a $500 to $600 million loss in general revenue. So I think those numbers are kind of interesting that we're cutting about the same amount that we reduced in capital gains last year. But I think heading into the budget cycle this year, for me, the role of House Democrats will be to protect the vital services that our departments provide. We would anticipate significantly fewer one-time expenditures happening, significantly fewer ongoing investments, and really getting to the core of what state government should be doing. I would argue, I think a majority of my caucus would argue that at the forefront of that conversation should always be protecting our state's most vulnerable and fully funding and investing in our public education system across the state. One thing I will add to that quickly, one of the things I was disappointed to hear was that we're going to have a 0% increase to higher education across the board. That will make tuition go up for those who are pursuing higher education degrees. And, as someone who represents Missouri State and OTC, I think that will be detrimental.
Ashley, my question for you guys is, why is this a bad time to get rid of the Missouri State income tax?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Betsy actually take that one.
Yeah. Happy to answer it. You know, the income tax elimination, the proposal would eliminate $9 billion of general revenue from our state's budget. And I am not here to say that the budget is more important than keeping tax dollars in people's pockets. I do think it's important that that we all recognize, the governor just spent an hour of his time highlighting all of the great things that state government provides its constituents. We took time to celebrate people who came to this chamber and into this gallery, people who have dedicated their life to fighting fire, fighting crime, all of the things. It is important that we can pay our bills. Eliminating the income tax right now, I think, is detrimental for several reasons. One, it places our budget in an unstable environment, potentially, depending on what the details are. But I think, as Rep. Ani mentioned earlier, my concern is that it has been touted as a net neutral proposal, meaning we are going to eliminate $9 billion of general revenue coming into our state, and we will increase that in other places. The governor mentioned a few things like closing loopholes. You do not generate $9 billion of economic activity off of closing the loopholes mentioned today, which to me signals that this will be an increase in sales tax, will be an increase on taxation of services, which will raise the cost of living for most Missourians. And I know that this is a time when people are struggling to pay their bills. This is a time when people are struggling to afford health care, and I'm not in support of any tax proposal that increases cost of living for my constituents.
Representatives, or well, any of you, obviously the economy is tough for a lot of people. So either way, people would love to see a tax cut one way or another. In what areas, especially in the upcoming budget, do you believe there could be other tax cuts that would save people more money than just the income tax?
I think most people, if you go poll people back home, most people would say that property taxes are a significantly greater concern than the state income tax. And I will be interested to see what proposals make their way through the legislative process this year. I would say one of the things that I did not think the governor mentioned a lot today in his nearly hour-long speech was the concept you just brought up, which is affordability. What are the things that the governor is positioning in this budget to make and lower the cost of living for working families across the state? I thought the governor could have done more to dive into that.
What is the governor today said that Missouri's population is stagnant, its economic growth has been below par, and he's tired of that. What do you blame those issues on?
I'm happy to take that one. Well, if you do the math, you'll recognize that Republicans have been in charge of this state for 2.5 decades now, and I think it's pretty clear where their policies have gotten us.
What is the position on nuclear energy? He said that Missouri's all in on nuclear power. I know there was a big conversation last year with QUIP. What is the perspective on that?
Sure. It's a tricky question to some degree because a lot of the future of nuclear relies at the federal level. Now, there are things that we as a state can do to try and prepare ourselves for that. Recognize that there are a number of other services that are needed. The state can start financing, putting seed money in to attract entrepreneurs, transportation companies, and so on. There's also a huge effort right now just in educating the populace, educating people about what nuclear means. There's new technologies on the horizon. Some other nations have actually started to adopt smaller nuclear plants. Smaller plant, smaller price tag, easier to finance. Right now, I think one of the biggest hurdles that we've been seeing in nuclear, it's just outrageously expensive. I think the last nuclear plants that came online were like $13 billion. $13 billion for a nuclear plant. That's a large financial investment. New technology, smaller plants, we're still waiting for the federal government to regulate, to license some of those. So in the meantime, the state of Missouri needs to get prepared. We need to prepare. We need to look at this. We need to work with our existing utility companies that they know this is coming and look at what things we need to do to incentivize other businesses and entrepreneurs so that our state is ready.
Does that mean that potential support of QUIP expansion towards nuclear power plants could be in the order?
We passed construction work in progress for gas-fired plants. And again, I think, as I mentioned before, the current technology around nuclear plants, $13 billion, that's a lot to swallow. And I don't think we're going to ask the people of Missouri to try and swallow that. What I think we would like to see is if there were any type of accounting treatment, construction work in progress, it would be associated with these smaller plants, this newer technology. But again, that's still a little further out on the horizon.
Why not make data centers buy their own micro-nuke reactors and kick them off our grid?
Data centers is another very important topic, and in fact, I've been talking to the utilities chairman. We had some educational hearings last year. We're probably going to have to do some educational hearings this year on data centers themselves because they consume a lot of power. Because they consume so much power, there's discussion about possible cogeneration. Should they make their own power, or should they be buying power from the local utilities? And if so, one thing that we've made clear is that they're going to pay for initial infrastructure associated with that data center. You build a data center, you're probably going to need a sub-transformer or sub-plant associated with it. They're going to be covering the cost of that. And there's also collateral. We don't want data centers coming in, being present for 2 or 3 years and then leaving. So there are some collateral payments that we're looking at. So data centers, very, very important topic. I think there's a lot of education, not only just for the legislatures, but people in the people of Missouri to understand just what we're doing to try and make sure that data centers are paying their fair share, but also that, Missouri can benefit from them.
There's been a lot of headlines in the last few years and for decades about radioactive waste that was spread all over St. Louis. And there is no national permanent repository for the spent fuel from nuclear power. If we have little nuclear power reactors all over the state, is anyone concerned about the escape of waste or radiation?
Our current nuclear plants store their nuclear waste on site. I think one of the things that we have to look at is we're talking about smaller plants and where we're going to be putting them. One proposal is the same utility companies that have been closing and shuttering some of their existing plants, some of the coal plants, maybe those are good locations for some of this newer, smaller technology. And again, we just don't know the solution to that. Right now, I will tell you that you're right. We don't have a national solution to nuclear waste. So what we've been doing at our nuclear plants is storing it on site, and we've not had any issues with that. So I think that's a question that we do have to investigate and make sure that we have a clear solution on how we're going to handle security, staffing, and the waste generated by these plants.
I have a question for. Go ahead. I have a question for Representative Ani, if I may. I'm sure you probably have seen the Kansas City area for weeks now has been lit up blue. People over there do not want to lose the Royals after what the Chiefs did. We didn't hear anything from the governor in his State of the State about keeping, the Royals hopefully in Missouri. What would you like to see, or can anything be done in this next session by state leaders to keep the Royals around the Kansas City, Missouri area?
Well, I think that our job here at the state level is done. I think it is up to Kansas City, Jackson County, wherever the final location is decided, hopefully if it is in Kansas City, for them to iron out those details. My hope is that they do it sooner rather than later and work closely with the team in a transparent way so that we can keep the Royals here and not somewhere else. Certainly, I don't want to see them move into Kansas, but I think that ship has sailed. So if the Royals leave Missouri, they're not going to be in the same market anymore. They will be in Nashville. They will be in Omaha. They will be somewhere else, and that's unacceptable.
If it's unacceptable, why do you think the state has done all it can and can't do more this upcoming budget or session?
I think that as we've talked about today, our budget is in a pretty tough spot right now. I also think that the proposal that the General Assembly came up with last year during special session was a good deal, not only for Missourians, but for the teams. It didn't go too far in either direction. I think it was a fair deal, and I don't think that there's any appetite in this building to go any further.
Does your caucus have a stance on the MSHSAA language, and were you surprised to hear him talk about that at the State of the State?
I was a little surprised, but I can't say I'm shocked. I mean, there's been frustration with Misha for years now in this building growing. Does anyone else have any thoughts on Misha? Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, like it's to me, listening to the governor talk about taking over Missouri high school athletics, rule promulgators. Good Lord, not even going to use that word. That's not what Missourians care about. What Missourians care about is how they pay for their groceries. It's how they pay for gas. It's how they get to work when our bridges are being shut down. I can tell you right now, there's a bridge between downtown Kansas City and the airport that will not be viable for the World Cup. Think about that, y'all. We've got a bridge down that goes straight to our airport in Kansas City. That's what Missourians care about. We care about affording our groceries. We care about affording childcare. That's what we should be focused on.
The governor's trying to put his income tax cut on the ballot. How do you think voters would respond to his suggestion that we tax Netflix or Spotify?
You know, my concern is that the governor won't mention all of the taxes he wants to add when he sells this income tax cut to Missouri voters. He'll be happy to leave out those details. He's going to tell Missouri voters that he is eliminating, that they're voting to eliminate their income tax, full stop. He is not going to tell them that he's going to raise taxes on services and on items. He's not going to say that. So Missourians are going to find that out once they voted to eliminate their own income taxes, is my fear.
Leader Ani, one thing that we really didn't hear much, if anything, about today is federal immigration enforcement. It's definitely something on top of mind of communities across Missouri and across the country right now. What is Missouri Democrats' stance on, is that an issue you're going to take up at all this session, or maybe folks that are kind of looking to your leadership for, hey, can something be done?
Well, we certainly have proposals. Some have been filed, some have not yet. But the things that House Democrats are focused on in terms of immigration enforcement include protecting Missourians from federal immigration enforcement. We want to make sure that whatever law enforcement is taking place in this state is transparent and it is by the book. We do not want law enforcement officials in this state wearing masks and abducting people off the street. That is wildly inappropriate. It's horrifying to see every single day, and you don't have to go far to find these videos. They exist everywhere, whether it is a woman, a mother being shot in the face in her car, or a U.S. citizen being dragged out of their vehicle because they had the audacity to protest, to exercise their First Amendment right as an American. It is horrifying, and Missouri Democrats will continue to come up with proposals that will likely be ignored by the supermajority. Anything else? All right. Thanks, y'all.
Appreciate it.
Great job. Sorry. Thank you so much.